Hello everyone, this is going to be a Photoshop tutorial that shows you some tips and tricks to create a series of different renderings. The goal is not necessarily to create a photorealistic rendering, but to create something that gets at the essence or idea of what a space or building or series of buildings or spaces might be like from the inside or the outside. So the first thing I'm going to show is just basic file setup. This file here is a section perspective drawing that kind of shows a cutaway of a proposed building design. And one of the things that was useful in this drawing was working back and forth between vector line work in Illustrator and raster image like editing for the textures and colors of like the sort of lightly rendered background. So the way to do this is to set up a linked file. I'm turning the linked portion on and off now so you can see the cut and the poche and the line work is on what looks like a layer, and it's actually a linked Illustrator file. So I'm going to demonstrate how to do that. And it's useful if you're working back and forth and you're wanting to have crisp line work that reads even after you've added color and texture. So I'm going to do that really simply. What you want to do first is you want to just make a Photoshop file that's set up like to the page size that you're wanting to work with. So go File, New, and then if you don't have a preset to the right size, you just click one and then you edit and change it. So I just am using 11 by 17. It's straightforward enough. So if you wanted something more custom, just pick one to start and then edit it. So if you wanted a different number, you could type it in there. Keep your pixels per inch to 300, a good rule of thumb in case you do need to print. CMYK color is fine because I'm using Illustrator. Normally Photoshop works in RGB, but I've set this to CMYK color, and you hit create. Since I've already done this, I'm gonna hit close. I have the file set up already. The next thing you want to do is go to Illustrator and make a new file that kind of matches that same paper size. So File, New. Same thing, I have 11 by 17 like kind of preloaded because I use it a lot, but make what you want. 11 by 17 and CMYK color and hit create. I've already done that, so I'm gonna hit close. So normally then what I would do is I would bring in my line work from whatever 3D modeling software I'm using. So you can do that. For the purposes of keeping things simple, I'm just gonna draw sort of a fake drawing for now. Maybe I'm drawing, this could be my good little building. So say this is my building. The last thing that I want to do is, and if you're bringing in line work from Rhino, that's great, but the one thing you do want to draw is just sort of like a bounding box that gets around the whole paper. So I snap, to my corners, and I just leave that stroke at like 1. It's fine. What this does is it just helps me know exactly. It keeps my line work and my Photoshop lined up perfectly. So just draw that bounding box, hit save, and then go to Photoshop, and you want to make a new layer and go File, Place Linked, and then navigate to where you've saved your Illustrator file, select it, hit Place, and then this is where Crop to Media Box. So select Media Box, hit OK, and then you have to hit Enter to complete the placing. And so now if you go back, you'll notice that it actually made a layer for itself, and you can't directly edit this layer. You can turn it on and off. You don't really want to edit this layer. What you want to use it for is just like being able to kind of have it as an overlay, or use it to like help define what areas you want to color. So I'll show you. I'm going to have this layer selected. I'm going to go over to the magic wand tool. I'm going to click inside the lines, and on either make a new layer or click on the one you made before. To make a new layer, you click the little paper, make a new layer, and then I'm going to hit G to get the paint bucket, double click the red to pull up my color picker, or if you're using swatches, you can pick from the swatches. In any case, I'm just going to pick a color for now, hit OK, and then color. I can go back and I can select this is a house, maybe select my roof, same thing, make a new layer. I like keeping things separate that I know are going to be different colors or textures or patterns, and fill in the roof. So now you'll notice, like, as I've done that, like, and I've added color and hit save for good measure, you'll notice, like, my line work doesn't really read very well. Arguably, it wasn't great line weights before, but now it's definitely too light. So to adjust that, I go back to Illustrator, I select whatever I want to make it a different line weight. I can change the stroke, and just as a demo, just change these so you can see them. Then I hit File, Save, and it takes a second, and then I click back to Photoshop, and now my line weights have just automatically uploaded or updated there. And so sometimes it'll take a second to think about it, especially if you have a busy file or big files, but it should kind of continue to update. If you ever like accidentally delete the layer, you can always like place it again. It's not like it's a one-time thing. You can turn it on and off as you're working, and I find it's just like a useful tool to be able to work back and forth between, again, like vector software of Illustrator with more like raster image-based Photoshop. So that's how I like to set files up. That's how I set this one up. You can definitely like break apart the line work as well. So like in this file, for example, I ended up bringing the line work in and then like putting masks on top of it to like have the line work sort of fade out a little bit. That's something that you can do too, so you don't have to strictly use that. Sometimes it's useful to like then like completely turn off line work and just have like the texture or the pattern show. So it's useful, and think of it as like a tool as you're building textures and patterns, but not necessarily it doesn't necessarily have to all be final. So in this file, for example, I used like white line work with a black poche in the end, and originally the line work, of course, was like black out of Rhino. So you can definitely think of it as a tool, and then later think about how you manipulate it. The next thing I thought I would show is just this like 3D site view of a proposed site in Kentucky. So this one is just from Google Earth using actually SketchUp and then bringing like a dumb 3D model into Google Earth from SketchUp and then exporting the view from Google Earth. And so this is what I started with. Notice how the Ohio River is quite brown. It must have rained sometime after Google took aerial views. So what I wanted to do is just kind of get this like kind of very basic, not so beautiful Google Earth weird shot and kind of treat it up a little bit to quickly make it look more presentable. So one of the first things that I do when I'm working with aerial views is I like to turn them black and white. So to do that, you click down here, this little half circle, or like circle that's like halfway filled in. You click it, and what it does is it gives you these options for adjustment layers. So I've used black and white, so I'm going to hit black and white to show you. And so now that brings up all of these sort of sliders where you can pull out certain colors. I'm just going to hit OK and I'm just going to let it be black and white. And then the next thing that I like to do is adjust the brightness and contrast. So I'm going to hit this again to get a new layer, and I'm going to go and find brightness and contrast. And this is where you can adjust now like how bright it is, and you can adjust like how heavy the contrast is, right? So if I go all the way to the right, it's like the blacks and the whites are like exaggerated. And if I go all the way to the left, it sort of mutes the blacks and whites and brings them closer to grayscale. The brightness just simply adjusts like how bright the entire image is. So maybe play around with that. What's nice is like you can always adjust this later. So using adjustment layers is a useful tool for being able to kind of adjust things as you go and tweak things without having to like adjust the actual image. So I can go back and here's my original Google Earth image. Now you can, instead of using adjustment layers, you can adjust things by going to image adjustments, and it has all the same options. What that does though is it changes that image kind of forever. Now you can go back to your original one if you have it saved somewhere else, but the beauty of using kind of the adjustment layers is that you can turn them on and off and you preserve sort of the original, albeit kind of ugly, Google Earth image. So I'll just turn the ones that I had messed with before back on and just slide those down. The next thing that I did is I wanted to actually highlight the water, because one of the things that was important about this site is the proximity of the site to the water. So to turn that blue, instead of leaving it brown, or in this case gray, it's pretty simple magic wand tool, and then I did a color overlay on top of that. So I'll just demonstrate that quickly here. So you just select the original Google Earth layer again, which is called background in my case. I'm going to go to the magic wand tool and I'm going to start clicking inside here. And that was pretty good. If you click and it doesn't pull up enough, or it pulls up too much, you can adjust the tolerance. So if I turn up here at the top, let me escape out of that. If I turn the tolerance way down, let's say to 1, and click, it's going to pick up like colors that are, now all of this is arguably brown, but within that brown, if I zoom in, you can see there's lots of tiny little pixels, and they're technically different colors. Maybe you can kind of see it here. And so if I turn that tolerance up to like 100, say, and I click, it's going to pick up like all the browns and all the things that are also kind of not even close to brown, given my like view here. So if I set it, I think I had it at 15 before. I found that it was a good happy medium. It's starting to pick up a lot of the water without accidentally picking up grass or the bridge. And then I'm zooming in and out by holding Alt in the scroll bar, just for reference. But to kind of gather some more of the brown water, I'm just going to hold Shift and continue to click. And notice as I click kind of around some of these areas that aren't highlighted with the little like ant trail, it's picking up more of them. I'm going to pick up the water on this side, and you know, if you zoom in, again, I haven't clicked out of this magic wand. I'm going to hold Shift to add to my selection, and I'm just going to pick up some more of this water. Careful not to pick up the floating restaurant. And okay, so you know, do it more carefully than this, but just for the purposes of the exercise, you know, I'm just going to go say that's good. I'm going to make a new layer, and then I'm just going to hit G to fill it. First though, I'm just going to pick a gray color instead of red, and I'll show you why in a second. So I'm just going to pick this gray color, I'm going to fill it gray, and then now what I'm going to do is, I don't want it to be gray, I don't want it to be red either, but I'm going to double click the layer, and I'm going to come down here, and these are just like different layer styles that you can play around with. I'm not going to go through all of them, I'm just going to show you like color overlay is the one that I've used for this exercise. So if you click on color overlay, notice that suddenly my water has turned black, and this has changed. And so I'm going to double click here, and now I can pick like a more blue, maybe something that's like not super bright and in your face, but definitely something better than that brown. So I'm just going to say that and hit OK. This is where, you know, if you wanted to change the opacity of the overlay, you could, meaning like whatever is on the actual layer. So I filled it with gray. So right now what's happening, if I turn the opacity all the way down, I see that gray paint that I filled. If I turn it all the way up, it's just going to be that blue. I'm just going to leave it up for now, but know that you can adjust that, which is kind of interesting as a tool I'll show later in the exercise. I'm going to hit OK. And then I am going to adjust the opacity of the overall water layer for now, so I get some of that water texture. It's like boat marks or something there. And so maybe it's looking a little green. I could go back and I can double click and change my color if it looks too green. Maybe I want it to be a little more blue, and hit OK. OK, and then OK. And then play around with that opacity again. So that was the water. That was what I did here. Turn that off and turn my other water back on. And turn the black and white and brightness contrast on. The next thing I did is just like, I actually wanted like my site to stand out. So I duplicated the background layer and then copied just my portion of the site. That's pretty simple, I won't go through that. The next thing was bringing in some line work. This is something I had exported from SketchUp, and I did the color overlay on that in the same way. I'll turn it off. Let me turn everything else off so you can see. Zoom in. So this is line work just from Illustrator. I had it, again, it came black from Illustrator, and I didn't want to have to do like a linked file, but I did want my color to be white, to have it stand out in contrast to my background. So I made it white by just double-clicking the layer, and going to color overlay again. So you can overlay onto line work as well. And then the last thing I did is I just sort of wanted to give this like a painterly look, instead of having it feel just like a Google Earth screenshot that I had edited. So to do that, I made a new layer. Let me turn the adjustment layer off so you can see. I made a new layer, and I hit G to bring up the paintbrush, and I just wanted to fill it white, so I just turned the white to the top, hit G, now my whole screen is white. And on this one I use screen, so if you go to the this little drop down here, there's all these different options for like how the layers can be set up. There's multiply is a good one. Screen is one that's just gonna like kind of give everything a little bit of a sort of screen. So if I adjust the opacity, you can see there. And then what I did is I'm putting a mask on this now to kind of hide some of my screen so I can show or highlight certain areas of the site. So just a quick intro to masks. If I hit the mask button and I have my little white corners are highlighted on the mask. If I click here, they're highlighted back on the image. So I'll show this. I'll just demonstrate this for a second. So if I select the paintbrush and I have the mask selected, not the actual layer, mask layer. If I have that selected and I paint black on top of the mask, it's not going to paint black, but it is going to kind of hide the actual like content on the layer. Remember, I just made this all white, so maybe if I turn it back up. If I paint on the actual layer, it will paint. I had that to normal, it would demonstrate. It will paint it actually black, which is what we don't want. So you just want to make sure that you're on the actual mask when you're painting. It doesn't really have to be black. You can paint really with any color on the mask. But again, if you're on the layer, it will paint whatever color you have selected. So I'm gonna hit undo. So that's how a mask works. You can highlight things too. I'm just gonna hit normal for a second. You can like cut out things and fill them in with the paint bucket, and it'll mask out like solid areas, so you don't have to like blur things. I like though the idea of painting with a paintbrush because you can pick like any sort of paintbrush that you might have downloaded and paint with that and mask with that. So like I have like these watercolor paintbrushes that I like to use sometimes. So if I do that on the mask, I can get like watercolor paint. If I hit the right bracket, it makes my watercolor brush or any brush bigger. If I hit the left bracket, it decreases the size. If you want a real painterly effect, you can start to mess around with the opacity. So if I turn the opacity down, when I paint on that mask, it's gonna like have a little bit of a blurred effect. So it might look kind of like, more like watercolor if that's what you're going for. So, I mean, that was kind of a bad one, but like this one I was watercoloring, and you can see it's kind of like a little more painterly than my weird demo here. If you accidentally, like, say I just like don't really like that little square there, I can go back and I can fill in with white, and what that does is it brings back the screen. So I can select the whole thing if I wanted to, hit G and fill in, and it'll fill in pretty well. You can also go back with a brush, turn the opacity back up all the way, and then paint back over. If you have like the selection tool, you'll only paint inside, so that's why I have that crisp line. If you aren't selected, then you can just paint, you know, and it'll hide things. So that's a good tip. Again, you're not like actually doing anything to the white fill, you're just doing it to the mask. So it allows you to kind of go back and forth. I'll show you later how like masks can be kind of interesting when you're like masking out like textures and patterns as well. So that's kind of the just gist of like how to quickly turn this into something a little bit more ethereal than, you know, this original Google Earth image. So that's that. I did want to say, in terms of brushes, this website, brushking.eu, is kind of a nice one that has like free downloads. If you Google like Photoshop brushes, you can find them elsewhere, but brushking.eu is a good one that has some like kind of crazy ones you'd never want to use, but it also has some good kind of subtle, not so intense ones as well. So that's that. The next thing I was going to show is how to edit scale figures and get them like into a useful format. So while I'm at it, the Mr. Cutout is a good resource for downloading things other than scale figures. It's just they have a lot of like PNGs. There are limits to how much you can download per day, so keep that in mind as you strategize before the end of the semester. But they have a lot of different options. They have like options and you can set things like number of people, like with pets, right? Like different angles. So it's like really useful for downloading exactly what you need. So that's a good one, mrcutout.com. I'm going to show you just how I then edit those people still. Like I don't necessarily use the straight up downloads. You can also just Google scale figure PNG and you can find a lot of free stuff online, but I do like Mr. Cutout. It's helpful to not have to filter through through Google. But in any case, what I normally do though, like once I've downloaded a scale figure, normally what I'll do is I'll edit that person a little bit. So let me just show you. I'm going to duplicate this layer a couple times just so I have the original option. So this one, let's do, so if you go image, adjustments, I'm going to do black and white and hit OK. And then I'm going to go image, adjustments, let's do, how about brightness contrast is one that I like to do. So sometimes I'll just turn up the contrast pretty high and turn up the brightness as well. And so suddenly like my scale figure doesn't have to be like just color. It's like she's now or they're now black and white, which can be useful if you're not trying to have lots of scale figures of different bright colors or patterns, and you just want all of those scale figures to be black and white. I'll show you a drawing where I did all black and white scale figures in a minute. The other thing you can do is like, well, once you have that scale figure, let's just do it on this one. So this lady, I can also change just the color of her. So if I go, I can make her black and white first if I want to, and then do it. So if I go image, adjustments, hue saturation is another one. And this one, just firstly, you can desaturate things and turn down the saturation. Let me show you that on the actual colorful one. So this is a good thing to know. If you go adjustments, hue saturation, you can turn down how saturated the image is, and as you'll see as I do it, if I turn it all the way up, like you see the bright color that you didn't even see in the original image, and if I turn it all the way down, it brings it almost to like a grayscale, but there's a subtlety to it, right? So you can be in between like full grayscale and like bright color. Lightness will again adjust the entire lightness of the image, going all the way from like full black to a full white. So you can adjust saturation pretty nicely, just like without you know, needing to do too much more than that if like a kind of desaturated look for people is a thing. The other thing you can do is you can colorize things. So if you are in that kind of monochromatic or like mood for rendering, or if you're trying to use like certain color palettes and you want your people to fit in, you can hit colorize, and then now you can change like to like if you're using like bright poppy colors, you can pick whatever sort of color makes the most sense. Maybe this is like a good color for my rendering. Again, you can saturate things if you wanted like bright versions, desaturate things. So you can, again, play around with that. You have to click colorize or it won't actually like change the color. So that's that. Hit OK. If you have like lots of scale figures and you want to do this kind of all in one, what I would do is I'll just duplicate her. So I have like, say I have like multiple people. It's not just the same person. You can do the same thing I did before with adjustment layers. So you click down here and then do whatever it is that you want to do. Hue, saturation, colorize. Let's make them blue and like that. And then what you want to do is, let's see, merge layers, and then you can separate them back out if you want to. So that's how you do it once without having to do it individually. So that's that. The other thing you can do, let's see, let me find, I'll just do it on this one. If you double click and go back to color overlay, double click and pick, from, here, or if you're using swatches, you can pick from a swatch. So double click, pull your swatches panel open. If you have swatches saved, you can pick your swatch. So the swatches, if you aren't familiar with Photoshop, is this little square thing. If any of your toolbars over here aren't open, you go to Window and pull them open, just like in Illustrator. So you can pick, from your swatches, or you can pick through the color picker, hit OK. This is where, like, if you have the opacity up fully, it'll just give you like the filled in silhouette. If you turn the opacity down, it's another way of kind of blending like the color overlay with whatever the actual texture is before. So if I had her black and white instead of orange, maybe it would be nice to add a little bit of texture and have her be colorized. But this is how you do like a full silhouette if you're kind of in the silhouette style of scale figures. So the high contrast black and white's a favorite of mine. A sort of colorized through, hue saturation is a nice one. Just a fully solid fill is another good idea as well. The last thing I thought I would show quickly is just how to do a shadow. It's pretty straightforward. So if I'm going to turn the shadow off just to show you. So if you just duplicate the person that you're trying to make a shadow for, now I have like this separate layer. I'm going to hit Control T to start to, I can shift her around, or Apple T if you're using a Mac. I'm going to rotate her and like pretend like I'm kind of casting a shadow on the ground. Think about where your sun's coming from, so you want to do all the scale figures or anything that's casting shadows to kind of match if you want things to be like accurate. And then I'm going to go to Edit Transform and then hit Distort to kind of just sort of elongate her and then like try and match her feet up. Distort's a good one. Maybe the sun's kind of coming from over here. Make it longer. Something like that. Maybe this is kind of a drastic sun angle. Hit OK. And it's sunny when it's raining because she's carrying an umbrella, so that was a good choice. Then I'm going to double click that again and do color overlay, and this is where I'm going to probably change this to just maybe a dark blue instead of fully black. I think just depending on the color in your rendering, you could just do fully black. And then I'm going to adjust the opacity. I'm going to just turn it down a little bit. And then the next thing you could do if you want it to be a little blurry, sometimes that's helpful. You can go Filter, Blur, and then just Motion Blur, and that'll affect how blurry it is. You can adjust the distance here, which is basically like how much movement do you want, how many pixels. I'm going to just keep it like a little bit blurry, and then the angle is kind of playing around with it. I don't really have I think normally I try and do the angle kind of like how I think the sun's going. So see how it, like when I have the angle adjusted like that, it's like pointing to me where the sun is, it kind of helps. So, okay, there's no like science to this. So that's a shadow. So there's some scale figures, different ways of doing them, adding shadows. I think that's all I had for you. Again, it really just depends on what you're trying to do with your drawings. So that was scale figures. The next thing is adding texture to a drawing and how to make a texture. So if I go back here, Texture is a good website. I think I've shown this before. Texture.com has lots of different options. Here I just found brick. I was looking for something that's not super crazy, so I just did like a white brick, I think is where I found this earlier. It's a good one too. They have lots of different, beyond brick, they just have lots of different things. It's free. So texture.com. So with this, I'm going to do some things to this first because I don't like how gray and muddy it gets, and there's just like too much. So when I repeat this pattern on whatever building or project I'm inserting it to, I'm going to notice that repetition because it's just too different from the rest of the white. So I'm going to go and I'm going to do an adjustment layer again, and I'm going to do brightness contrast. I'm going to turn up the brightness, turn down the contrast. It's still not quite getting that gray out, so I'm going to do another one. Let's go back to my layer panel, hit the little half circle. I'm going to do curves. And so I'm going to just adjust here, and if I click in the middle, what it's doing is it's kind of taking all of the gray tones and making them like more similar. If I pull down the white, it's kind of think about it as like moving, like taking the white out. Same thing, like if I pull up the black, it's kind of taking some of the darkest blacks out. But so for this, I'm just going to play around with it until it's kind of looking similar and like it might repeat nicely. So, and I'm really just using this as an overlay, as a texture. So I don't like care about the color. Like I can change the color to whatever I want with the color overlay later. So I'm just trying to get like that white and sort of grayish grout in there. So I don't know, maybe this is good enough. More white in it. Okay, so I'm going to say that's good enough. So I have this sort of edited brick. And now what I could do is I could like duplicate this brick around. Maybe I'll show that. So I could, I'm going to make the canvas size a little bigger just to demonstrate this for a second. Image, canvas size, width. Hit OK. I guess that wasn't that much bigger. Image, canvas size, 30. So just kind of big as it is. But so I guess I should unlock my brick before I do that, but it'll be okay. So just gonna, you can edit this and duplicate the layer. By dragging it down. And I have that black edge, so I'm just going to delete that black out for a second. And, you can duplicate it around and kind of tile this brick to be like whatever size you wanted it to be. I'm going to undo all that. So that's, you've done that before, I'm sure, where you've made brick. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, I undid all of that wonderful curves editing. I'm going to just go ahead and make this a pattern, though. So if I go up to image, if I go back to layer, I know it's over here. Maybe. And select pattern. So if you click the little circle tool, I forgot how to do this, hit pattern, and then what it's going to do is it's going to make a pattern, and you hit OK. You can change the scale of it if you want to, so I can make it really tiny, really big. I'm going to just change the scale like to maybe not 12, so that looks crazy, like to that maybe. Hit OK. And then if I go, over to my drawing, then I can hit pattern and make a new file, and it'll make a new layer, and you can adjust how big or small the brick is. Hit OK. And I'm just going to turn all this off for a second so you can see it. And so what you can do now is if you have maybe there's a wall here I could show. I'm just going to turn the pattern off for a second, turn this back on. So maybe I'll make this wall brick. So if you want to use the quick select or magic wand tool to select that shape, you could, or I just drew it with the polygonal lasso tool. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a mask on this pattern fill by clicking the mask layer, and then I'm going to hit select inverse, and now what it's going to do is it's going to select everything else about the brick, and I'm going to hit G, and that fills in. So I'm just masking out the rest of that brick now. So if I right click disable layer mask, it'll turn that mask off. If I hit enable, it'll turn it back on. And now the thing that's tricky, if I want to skew this to have it not be just horizontal, you can do that. It's a little weird. You have to duplicate the layer and then delete this layer mask for now. I'm going to turn this off for a second. You right click on the layer that you deleted the mask from, and you convert it to a smart object. And then I'm just going to click this mask and drag it back on top of it. So that was kind of tricky. But now if I edit if I unclick the link and I unclick that little link, and then now I can hit Control T and I can kind of scale that brick around. I can edit, transform, skew it, and kind of get it to point in the direction I want, and adjust it that way. So it's a little tricky if you want to skew things. So that's just a way, if you have lots of different patterns loaded, I can also distort this. Edit, transform, distort. So if you have patterns that you've made, right, it's pretty useful because you can just preload the patterns, or if you've downloaded them. So there's some brick, you can move it around and get it lined up how you want. And then, for good measure, normally what I'll do is I'll just lower the opacity or adjust the opacity of that. I'm just going to delete that one. So that's a way of doing it. So if you imagine if you have all these patterns that you make that you can just continue to use, I don't have too many of them, but you can just continually load them in without having to download textures every time. So that's patterning, scaled figures, patterns. This is a file just to show. This was a project where it's the longest building ever. So it was a fun one. But this one is just to show how you can take some line work, some shaded view, or a light shadow view, and really have fun with the drawing pretty simply. So this one, I'll just show you kind of some of the layers. It's a lot of layers, but there's poché, which is just line work that I filled in, either in Illustrator or Photoshop, I can't really even remember. Within each room, though, it's just a light wood floor texture that's just used as an underlay. And then I've used my line work to color in different bright colored furniture. And so it's a really simple drawing. The light shadows are in there too on a low opacity layer. So it's just a very simple drawing with not too much detail, but one that kind of told the story of the space. So that's another one. Let's see. This is a rendering that I had taken a Photoshop, or a Rhino file and done a light rendering just straight up out of Rhino, and then a lot of what you're seeing is just like Photoshop on top of things. So it's like a watercolor splatter. It's a lot of masking. The water was just an image from the internet. The rain is a filter. I'll show you how to do that one. So this is just like, this part is the actual like just dumb Rhino rendering, and then the rest is just added Photoshop, again, like black and white crane that's just like masked into here. This is just something I drew. This is a train photoshopped in, so it's kind of photorealistic, but not really. I thought I'd just show you quickly some of that stuff. This is a just example file that I just made this afternoon. So if this is just a project of single family residence. This is just straight up out of SketchUp, no anything, just the no line work, just sort of dumb SketchUp export, where I just kind of went through and started playing around. I found this image of the sky. If I disable the layer mask, you can see it's just like this dark sky from the internet. I turned the opacity down a bit, and then I masked out, you know, around sort of the building, so I wouldn't have like as much of the foreground in there. So to do that, again, just duplicate and show you. So I'll turn this off. I'm going to delete this layer mask. But to do a layer mask, you hit this this rectangle with the circle in it, and then here's where you go to your brushes. And I'm just with the black. I'm painting. Okay, that's a bit bright, so I'm gonna turn it down a little bit. I'm gonna paint out. I'm gonna turn off the building. I'm gonna turn the opacity up for now. And I'm gonna paint out, you know, this landscaping. I'll turn up the opacity. Don't really want that in there. Turn my sight back on so you can see. Let's see, so I paint out the rest. And then what you can do too is like you can, in your SketchUp background, you can use the magic wand tool and then select the sky. A lot of times like the SketchUp sky comes in pretty blue, or if you're using Rhino, like whatever the background is might come in as like a solid, which is useful for selecting with the magic wand tool. Then I'm going to do select inverse, and then I'm just going to fill that. If I go to my layer, I'm just going to fill that on my mask. So I go to the mask, hit G, and then that fills in. You can see some weirdness. Sometimes it gets a little weird. But then that cuts out kind of around my building. And then I'm going to go back with, but since it's a mask, it doesn't matter, right? So then I'm going to go back. I'm going to deselect by just clicking once, clicking the little rectangle, clicking once. And I'm going to go back with my paintbrush, and I'm going to kind of like blur those edges so it doesn't look so crummy. So again, black will remove, and then if I go to white, it'll put it back. And I'm going to adjust the opacity and kind of blur some of this, right? And it's just like painting. I'm just blurring out that bad SketchUp tree, and you know, you just kind of paint around. You can use different brushes too. This is again the watercolor one, but if you download watercolor one's great, but you can also just use a brush that's like pretty low opacity, or just like kind of one of the blurrier ones, I guess, and you can adjust again the opacity. So okay, so pretend I did that for longer. So that's how I did like just the sky. I just, you know, made it kind of cleaner. And then another thing that you can do with like SketchUp or again Rhino, if you have like solid fills, is you can just like select the select whatever the fill color is. So say I want to color all of this ground to be not so dark. Just make a new layer, hit G, fill it any color I want, double click, do a color overlay, and go from there. So it's kind of useful. I'd say like you can do that with the ground too if you want. Let's see. The next thing that you can do is grass, which I think this one is like kind of useful, kind of not, but I'll show it quickly. So I just found a picture of grass on the internet, and I made a mask by selecting out the ground. So, you know, magic wand tool, the ground, and then select your grass layer. Just duplicate it to show you. I'm going to delete that layer mask so you can see it. So now I have like the whole grass layer. And then if you hit, again, select inverse, because I don't want, you know, I just want the non-grass area. And then hit G. And then I'm going to fill that in. It's weird. I'm going to just keep doing that. Because I'm actually, oh, this is where it's, I didn't hit a mask first. So this is important. Delete the layer mask. Just to show you. So here's my grass hobby. You got to make the layer mask first. And there, now it makes it. Now, what this layer here is where I was just painting with grass. So this is kind of a useful one. So it uses the clone stamp. I'll show you. I'm going to zoom in. And so I have like this grass that's like cut like weird, like crisply to my line. So what I'm going to do is I made a new layer. So make a new layer. And then I'm going to hit the clone stamp. Now you can clone stamp with anything. You can clone stamp with like a circle. And so I'll show you that first. So hit the clone stamp, and up here whatever yours might be set to something else. I'm just going to show you with the circle first. If I hit option, it's asking me what do I want to stamp, and you'll notice that this little circle target comes up. So I'm going to just say I want to clone stamp the dog. And so if I holding option and then letting option go, it's going to like stamp that dog anywhere. Now if I hit the left bracket, I can make my stamp area smaller. So hit option again. I'm going to just stamp part of the dog. If I hit the right bracket, it'll make my area bigger. Hit option, and now I'm going to stamp the dog and part of the house, right? So that's how clone stamp works generally. You can do that with a blurred brush, so you don't have like such a hard edge. So watch, I'm going to make it smaller so you can see. Left bracket to make it smaller. But so if I want to stamp the dog, notice now when I go to paint him, he's like a little blurrier. So that's kind of helpful. The other thing you can do, which I did for grass, is you can clone stamp grass, or you can clone stamp like the shape of grass, I guess. So if I click the grass brush, notice that there's like a big grass blade. I'm going to hit the left bracket to make that blade smaller. I'm going to select somewhere in my grass, and then again make sure you have a new layer selected, and make sure, this is the important part, that up here it says current and below instead of current layer. If it says current layer, it's gonna select only things on that layer to stamp. If you have current and below selected, it'll select anything on that layer, which right now is nothing, and anything below it that's on. So here, maybe I'll just make it bigger so you can see. But so if I have that grass shape and I select the grass, it's going to stamp that grass, but it's going to make like big blades. And I want like something kind of smaller than that. So I'm going to undo those. So I'm just going to turn the size down, and then I'm just going to paint with that sort of brush to kind of blur those edges a bit more. And again, hitting, maybe that was a lot, but you can do this around like your building too. So if I clone stamp kind of up here, and I want to just like add a couple more things to make it not look like it's like completely fake. So just blur the edges, I guess, is the long story short. So I did that with the grass. Again, now, like the thing that bothered me about this, I would say, is that the grass was so green. So the next thing I wanted to do was to change that, and I did that using an adjustment layer. So I did hue and saturation and just desaturated that grass. So again, adjustment layers down here. I'm just going to delete this one for a second to show you. So I grouped the grass, so that's a good tip. So if you have like multiple layers, if you select them and hit Shift, you can hit Command G or Control G and make a group for anything. So I did that, and I should probably label it grass so it's easy to find things later. But then I'm going to do a new adjustment layer, hue saturation. I'm going to hit this little button down here, which will make it just for the layer immediately below. So I'm going to clip it to that. And then here you can adjust the hue. So if you wanted your grass to be, orange, you could. But I'm going to just simply, I'm going to desaturate it and lighten it a bit. So in any case, I adjusted the grass so it's not so garishly green. I think that's the biggest thing about renderings is the grass or like landscape elements. The next thing I wanted to do was like make it feel like it was raining, just to demonstrate like the rendering here. So you can. This is a pretty simple one. So I'm gonna turn my sky back on, the good sky on, so you can see it. But so to make rain, you make a new layer, hit G, fill black, and then go filter, noise, add noise. This thing pops up. Doesn't really matter uniform or not. I just do uniform. You can adjust the amount of noise. So like the brighter, the contrast, right? So like more noise, the darker, like the less noise, just because it's on black. So I'm gonna hit OK there. And then the next thing you want to do is go filter, blur, motion blur again. Same. We did this a little bit earlier too for the shadows, but so motion blur, now this noise, you can adjust like what angle it's raining. The distance can adjust like how blurry it is, but I think fewer pixels might maybe make it look like it's raining. Hit, maybe that looks kind of good. Hit OK. And then the next thing you want to do is change up here. Again, there's lots of things to fool around with, play with them, but I changed this to screen. And so then that's gonna like really make look like it's like raining a lot here. So then I'm gonna take the opacity down a little bit so it's not quite so crazy. So there's that. The next thing is you can download, this is just to show, I'm gonna turn this all off for a second. This is just to show, like, this is just an image I Googled lens flare on the internet and found this, saved it, and then overlaid it, and then turned the opacity down, and then I turned this to overlay, and so it just adds, like, this, like, layer of, keep turning the bad sky on, just, like, this, like, other layer of information. Again, it's raining, so I don't know why I have a lens flare, but it just kind of added this, like, nice color, so you can play around with adding, just overlaying anything, and then adjusting, like, maybe I'll show some of these. If I did overlay, what it looks like. If it's a soft light, notice it changes. It makes it more subtle. Multiply is one that's kind of interesting, where it'll just like it makes everything darker. In any case, there's more you can play with. I'm going to turn it down a little bit. Maybe I like the color. The next one is brightness contrast. So again, turn this down more. You can play around with brightness contrast. Again, maybe I want to make it a little darker if it's raining, and I want to turn the contrast down, or maybe I want to turn it up. Just kind of play around with like what makes the most sense given your color palette. But that's just another layer here, and you can do that on top of everything at the end. And then the last one is just a new screen. So if I hit a new layer and hit G, and then change it to white, again, fill it in, and then make a mask, and I paint over it with a paintbrush on the mask to just highlight like my actual building. You can play around with, I should turn that off. You can do like different, like soft light's kind of a good one, and it just like kind of, if you want to draw attention to something in your drawing, it could be a useful tool to like mask out other things. You can again adjust the opacity of one of those too. So that's that. Quick, not too long steps to take like this image here to something a little more exciting. In any case, that's that one. Let's see. Oh, adding trees. This is a useful tool that newer versions of Photoshop, you probably all have new versions now, but Photoshop has like trees, so if you make a new layer, go to Filter, Render, Tree. It brings up this whole selection of options for trees. You can change like where the light's coming from. You can change like sizes of like the amount of leaves, the size of the leaves, everything about the tree. There's like options for different types of leaves that you can edit. And I think it's a fun thing to play around with. They have different preloaded trees. In any case, I'm just going to pick this one. This one looks fine. Hit OK. And it brings you a tree on whatever layer you had selected. So that's a good thing to keep in mind. Is like you have to make a layer for it. It doesn't make its own layer like some of the other filter renders do. Now, this looks kind of fake. Again, it's the color that gets me. So you can do the same thing where you can either bring up like a new adjustment layer, like hue saturation is a good one. Just desaturate it, I think, is really useful. You can colorize it. You can do whatever. I think you can't just use the basic tree. I think you have to do something to it. So you can either do that and then merge the layers. If you have multiple trees, you could, group them all together. You can also, like, if you want, you can just go image adjustments and then adjust like hue saturation or color balance there. But so that's it. Play around with filter render tree, a useful one. Let's see. This last one is just to show like some of those examples. Earlier I showed you how to make black and white people, and I have the shadows that I made. This is just like a photograph of the site that I turned black and white and adjusted the opacity. I have like line work linked from Illustrator. It's really subtle, but some dashed lines that I just drew in Illustrator quickly. And this was actually just a photograph of like handmade models that I had made for a project that I just collaged all together in a like kind of more post-digital collage style rendering. So I think that's kind of the gist of just the Photoshop quick tutorial showing different options for how to make a series of drawings. Thank you.